Welcome to a special series called The Global Crisis Monitor, featured on the Treasury Update podcast. Thank you for joining. On this episode of the podcast, special host Meredith Zonsius talks with managing partner Craig Jeffery and consultant Alexa Cook of Strategic Treasure on the fourth week of results from the COVID-19 Impact and Response Survey. This new wave of responses from Treasury and finance professionals reveal major issues impacting our industry this week around changes to investing allocations, hedging activities with view to exposure to foreign currency, economic outlook, and more. Welcome back to the show, Craig and Alexa.
Thanks, Meredith. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, me too.
So the results from the fourth week of the monitor are in. Tell me the headlines and key takeaways first.
The first thing has to do with the participation. We have over 500 companies around the globe who've participated. That's a pretty significant milestone, and we're really happy for the participation. The second, in terms of what the survey says, I would say that economic distancing and pessimism grows. And this is a negative outlook, and the length of time until we see a positive outlook on the economy now sits at 10 months. When we look at the 3-month and 12-month estimates of economic strength, and when we look at the measurement, the weekly measurement we have on a return to financial normalcy, that has added another month as it is extended each week, and now sits at 9 months. So that's the negative headline.
And then I mentioned last week that some of the health issues were slowly dissipating. So again, that's still something that's continuing to dissipate, and the reopening delays are definitely taking a top concern. And then AR and AP has been falling hard. So that's a big headline too.
Any positive headlines?
Yeah, so the loan covenants and the MAC clause were highly negative last week, and they've moved forward into a more neutral position.
So we had some new questions. Can you explain a little bit about what those questions are that were surveyed this week?
Yeah, Meredith. So each week we cycle some questions in and some questions out. So this week we had cycled in some questions about FX exposures and hedging, gauging how many people have significant FX exposures, how many have been hedging, started hedging, or would hedge, or we're looking at this closely. And in 2020, we now see just about a 25% increase in the number of firms who either started hedging or plan to hedge this year, or are evaluating it very carefully. So that's a pretty significant jump, and that's a reflection on some of the volatility we've seen with some of the currency pairs.
Let's get into some of the details of this week's results. How are people feeling about their organization's outlook on liquidity positions?
Yeah, that's access to liquidity was the top concern compared to a number of different options. But also the week-to-week measurement showed that the concerns about it deteriorated slightly or significantly. And that outstripped those that felt things had improved by about 10%. So a little bit, somewhere around 10% more of the population moved negatively versus having a more positive outlook during this period of time. So that access to liquidity and organizations' future liquidity prospects continues to dim a bit week over week.
Let's talk recovery perceptions with a focus on health and economic.
Okay, I can start there with the health. So there's definitely less of a concern than when we started the survey, 5 weeks ago? And that level of concern personally has continued to improve each week, and we're almost to that equilibrium point.
On the economic side, I mentioned in the headlines the return to financial normalcy. So that question we ask that each week. How long do people think it'll take till we return to that level? Each week it's extended. It's gotten farther away. It's the proverbial carrot in front of the car, but now it's getting farther ahead of us. Now it sits at about 9 months, and that's about a month extension since last week. So we added a week. It should have pulled in a week, but instead it has extended out a month. So that's just part of the negative economic sentiment that continues to grow, that's grown over these 4 weeks of the survey.
Last week we discussed AP and AR. Are some interesting changes there to report, Craig?
Interesting, maybe a little bit sobering. Alexa had mentioned that AR and AP have fallen hard. So AR has been extremely negative, but started subsiding or noticeably subsiding in the prior week survey. That completely fell apart this week. It deteriorated. It went to more than 10 times negative. Very, very few organizations felt there was any improvement in their AR outlook, and an increased number felt it went negative. That's a big area to watch as we look forward to the next several weeks, see how that shakes out. And related to that has to do with AP. And those who are attentive listeners will remember that we added questions about AP the last iteration. We added another 10% of companies that are paying later than they do normally. So last week it was a little bit north of 30%. This week it's grown to over 40%. And the only bright spot I can find in there is that there's a significant portion of those delays are from the move to people working from home. That's created a capacity issue and a challenge with people working remotely.
Any expectations as we look ahead?
We've added a few questions or a few calibrated questions on when countries will open back up, when the lockdown will change. We had a lot of feedback about that being such a big concern. So we really want to see what's going on there. And so anybody who's listening, please take the survey and weigh in on that. The second, this is an expectation not about the survey, but I want to see what happens if there's any changes as funding may hit small and medium-sized businesses in some of the larger Western countries where there's some financial support through some of the different programs, both in the EU and the UK and the US, et cetera.
Thanks for sharing, Alexa and Craig. It's great to have you share this informative message week by week. And we'll continue to monitor the situation and see what's out there. Stay safe.
Thanks, Meredith. You too.
You too.
We wanted to encourage you to take the Global Crisis Monitor survey repeatedly while it's live. It runs from Wednesday to Tuesday every week. You can go to treasurycoalition.com and follow the links. Add your voice and insight so that as a profession, we can take positive and knowledgeable steps to move our organizations and nations forward. Invest 5 minutes each week at treasurycoalition.com and get great information and insights while helping our profession and organizations.
This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.